Okay, really quick, I want to go back in your notes. So you see this page where it says congruent segments. I kind of neglected to talk about one thing about congruent segments. So the way that we identify congruent segments in a picture is with this little hash right here. And it's kind of hard to see, so I'm going to go over it with my pen. Okay, if you see one little dash like that, that means that those are congruent. Okay, so if you see those randomly in a picture, you can assume that those have the same length or the same measure, same size, same shape. Okay, so if I turn now to 1.3, we're going to start off with our vocabulary again today. So our first word is midpoint, and midpoint is a point that divides the segment into two. I'm going to use this, which we know means congruent. So if you want to write the word congruent, you can. Segments. Okay, that's just a good note-taking tool to abbreviate where you can. And so since we have a symbol for congruent, then why not use it, right? Okay, so then the next one is a segment bisector. Okay, a segment bisector can be a point, line, segment, ray, or a plane that intersects the segment at its midpoint. Okay, we'll notice then that a midpoint or segment bisector, we would say that that bisects, that's the verb, I guess you'd say you'd use a segment. So if I say bisects, that means to cut in half. Okay, so a midpoint or segment bisector bisects a segment, it cuts it in half. Okay, example 1. The skateboard design segment VW bisects segment XY at point T. And XT is 39.9 centimeters. So X to T is 39.9. And it tells me that VW is cutting XY in half, which means, which you can kind of see it there in your notes, it kind of already gives you those hash marks, but you can make them darker if you want. It means that those are congruent, right? So it wants us to find XY. Well, that would be the whole thing. So if I know if this half is 39.9, and I know that they're the same, that one would be 39.9. So XY would equal 39.9 plus 39.9, or you can do times 2, it's the same thing, which would give us 79.8, and we are measuring that in centimeters. And I need to go ahead and replace my XY again for my final answer. So I write XY equals 79.8 centimeters. Okay, example 2, it says point M is the midpoint of segment VW. So M is in the middle, it's the midpoint of VW. Find the length of VM. Well, I can't just say, oh, it's 4x minus 1. That's not a length. I don't know what x is, right? So I got to solve for x first. But if I want to solve for x, well, I don't know what the length of the whole segment is to be able to add them together and set them equal to that, right? So instead, I know that these two pieces are the same, which again, you can see that hash mark there showing you that's true. So I'm going to set them equal to each other. So 4x minus 1 equals 3x plus 3. So let's add 1. So I get 4x equals 3x plus 4. Subtract 3x. And I'm left off with x equals 4. Okay, x equals 4, done. Nope, just kidding. Again, go back and see if I answered the question. Did it ask me what x was, or what did it ask me? It asked me to find the length of VM, so I have to take that value now and plug it back in. VM is 4 times 4 minus 1. Should be 16 minus 1, which is 15. So VM equals 15. Okay, you can stick units on there if you want, or you can just leave it as 15. I don't care about that one. Okay, again, construction, we're going to skip that, so you can go ahead and turn page. All right, so here are the big 2 things that you need to take away from this lesson. Okay, if you are in geometry, you need to memorize these. Okay, I will not be giving you these on your tests or quizzes. You'll have to know them on your own. Okay, if you are in geometry concepts, I will have them written on the board for you. Okay, so but you, again, just because they're written on the board doesn't mean that's your magical answer. You have to understand how to use these and when to apply them where. Okay, so everyone, regardless of what class you're in, needs to really be paying attention. All right, so the midpoint formula is capital M. You're going to do x1, so I write a little 1 down below, plus x2 all over 2, comma, y1 plus y2 all over 2. Okay, so you notice that that's set up as like a point. This would be my new x value, and this would be my new y value. So that's taking 2 x's and 2 y's, and if I add them together and divide by how many there are, wouldn't you say that it's finding the average, okay? Or that's finding the middle point, that midpoint, okay? So kind of a way to remember it there. Okay, and then your distance formula, we use a lowercase d. So d is equal to, now we're going to draw a big square root sign, parenthesis x2 minus x1, close parenthesis squared, plus y2 minus y1, close parenthesis squared. Okay, let me go ahead and make that a little bit bigger so you can see that if you need to fill that in. Okay, that's what that looks like. Okay, all right, so we are going to do example 3 now. It says using the midpoint formula. It says the endpoints of segment RS are R at 1, -3, and S 4, 2. Find the coordinates of the midpoint M. And then if you notice, it says find each distance for A and B. Okay, so we're going to do both here. We're going to find the midpoint and we're going to find the distance. So R is at 1, -3. So there's R. And S is at 4, 2. Okay, so there's my segment. First, we are going to find the midpoint. Okay, so capital M. Okay, if you need to, put x1, y1, x2, y2. Now, look at that formula and just plug them in. Okay, 1 plus 4 over 2, comma, -3 plus 2 all over 2. Okay, so my midpoint then is at 1 plus 4 is 5. 5 divided by 2, well, 5 is not divisible by 2, so we're just going to leave it like that. 5 divided by 2. -3 plus 2 is -1. -1 divided by 2, well, that doesn't come out nice either, so you just leave it alone. Leave it as a fraction. Okay, no need to get your calculator out and figure out what decimal that is, even though that should be an easy decimal for you to know. Don't need it. Okay, so let's do the distance now. Okay, so I already have them labeled. So you can put it, the lowercase d equals, but I really actually want to call this capital R, capital S, because I'm finding the length of that segment. Okay, so instead of d, you can just put RS. All right, so then I need a big square root. Okay, so I've labeled them here, so you can just go ahead and plug them in just like that if you want to. So I have 4 minus 1, so those are the 2 x's, squared, plus, open your parenthesis again. I started with 4 on my x's, so I have to start with the y that goes with that x. Okay, I can't jump over and start over here. with the other value, because then it would mess me up and I'm not going to get the correct answer. So if I started with 4, I start with 2 minus -3 becomes +3 squared. Okay, now I tell everybody to do this one step at a time, okay? Do what's on the inside of your parentheses first, and that's it. Okay, so that's gonna give me 4 minus 1 is 3 squared, plus 2 plus 3 is 5 squared. Okay, now I'm just gonna square both things. So I get 3 squared is 9, 5 squared is 25. Okay, now I add them together. 9 plus 25 is 34. And if you want to get a calculator out, okay, if I take the square root, okay, if you need to know where the square root is, it's very similar in the smaller calculators too. I know this is a graphing calculator, but you can see that, and it'll be the same way. Like I said, it's up above here, okay? So that's my x squared key. Up above there, I see that square root sign. So to get that, I have to hit the second key or the shift key, and then hit that button, and you should see it pop up. And then you can type in 34, click enter, and look, it comes out with a decimal, okay? So we can just go ahead and leave it as that for right now, just the square root of 34, okay? All right, let's go over to the next one then. So on B, the midpoint, it says, of segment JK is M at 2, 1. So 2, 1, and that's the midpoint. So that is M. And then J is at 1, 4. Oops, I wrote my M in the wrong place. That's okay. All right. So that's in the middle. So that means that K I know is going to be down here somewhere. So that M's in the middle, but I'm not quite sure where. So whenever you are given the midpoint, what you're going to do is you're going to make an XY chart like this. Okay. The numbers that you're going to write down first are the numbers of the end point. So the end point is J. So J is 1, 4. So I'm going to write a 1 and then a 4. Okay. X and then Y, right? Then I write the midpoint, so that is 2, 1. Then my other end point is going to be right here whenever I get done, okay? So it's going to be end, middle, end whenever I get done. Makes sense because the middle is, or the midpoint is in the middle, right? Okay, so then I ask myself, how did I get from 1 to 2? What did I add or, excuse me, what did I add or subtract? Well, I added 1, right? So I need to add 1 again. 2 plus 1 is 3. Okay. Then ask yourself, how did I get from 4 to 1? Well, I subtracted 3. So do it again, minus 3 one more time. 1 minus 3 is -2. Okay, so K is the the endpoint that you're looking for. So K is at 3, -2. So 3, -2. There's K. Okay, and then you could connect all 3 if you wanted to. All right, now let's find the distance. So I want to find the distance from J all the way to K. Okay, so let's write J down here next to it. So I have it 1, 4. You can write x1, y1, x2, y2 if you need to. Okay, big square root. I have 1 minus 3 squared plus 4 minus -2 becomes +2 squared. Just do the parentheses. 1 minus 3 is -2. I'm going to keep that -2 in parentheses. It's important. If I get a negative number, keep it in parentheses. Plus 4 plus 2 is 6 squared. Okay, now, if I have a calculator, and again, this will happen the same way if you have the smaller calculator, it's fine. If I just type in -2 squared, okay, or if you hit the caret, either way, it's going to tell me that the answer is -4. But I know that if I take -2 times -2, which is what squaring means, right? that shouldn't get you a negative number. It should always, always, always get you a positive number, okay? So that's why I said it's so important that we use those parentheses, right? So I have to use parentheses, -2, close your parentheses, then square it. And that will give me the right answer. Because what this is telling me to do right here is if we use PIMDAS, remember exponents is the second thing there, okay? It's telling me to take 2 squared, so 2 times 2 is 4, okay? There's your squared. Then it's multiplying it by this -1 out front, and that's what's giving me that -4, okay? So it's so important that we have to use parentheses, or just use your brain a little bit, right? And think, okay, if I'm gonna multiply a negative number times itself, 2 negatives always, always, always ends up in a positive. Okay, that's a very, very highly missed part whenever we're doing distance formula. So I need you to be careful and I need you to pay attention there. Okay, so this should be -2 squared is 4. Okay, again, remember distance cannot be negative, so I should not end up with negative numbers in here. And 6 squared is 36. Now if I take 36 plus 4, I get 40. Again, let's get our calculator. If I take the square root of 40, it does not come out nicely. Okay, so we're going to leave it just like that for right now. Okay. Actually, I'm going to tell geometry concepts to leave it like that. I want to talk about something really quick with geometry. So if you are in geometry concepts, you can fast forward until you see me start working on example 4. Okay, but if not, stay with me here for a minute. So if you're in geometry, what I want to teach you to do really quick is how to put it in simplest radical form. Okay, so I know that this does not come out nicely. Okay, but I know that 40 can be broken down into some things. So what can I divide 40 by? Well, I can divide 40 by 4, and that comes out to 4 times 10, right? Well, 4 can be broken down again into 2 times 2. Well, 2 is only 2 times 1, so I'm done there. Okay, leave it at 2. So I'm done with this 4. Okay, well, 10 can be divided by 2 and 5. 2 can only be broken down into 2 and 1 again, so I leave it there. 5 can only be broken down into 5 and 1, so I leave it there. Okay, so I'm done with that 10. I'm done with the 40, okay? So now all that I'm looking at is 2, 2, 2, and 5, okay? So now I'm gonna think about this like if I'm in jail, right? This radical, or the square root sign is what that's called, is kind of like jail, okay? The only way I can break out of jail is if I have a buddy, okay? Well, these 2's have buddies, right? There's a pair there. So I'm gonna circle that pair. But then I'm left with 1 more 2 and 1 more 5, but they aren't buddies, right? They're not in the same cell. They can't help each other out. So I'm gonna put a square around both of those, okay? All right, if I have a buddy, like I said, I get to break out of jail, right? So that means that I get to bust out, but only one of us gets to bust out. The other one just doesn't exist anymore, right? He was just our friendly accomplice there, okay? All right, so 1 gets to bust out, okay? Now the 2 that I square that didn't have buddies have to stay inside. So they stay inside and they become 2 times 5, okay? Well, 2 times 5 is 10, so it's 2 root 10. So that is simplest radical form, okay? The square root of 40 becomes 2 root 10. Say if I did have another set example, maybe of 2's out here that I could circle as well, I would pull out this 2 that I put right here, and then I would put times another 2, and then I would start my square root sign once I cannot, once I don't have any more pairs, right? So anything on the outside that's get taken out, or anything that all goes back on the inside, either way, they get multiplied together, okay? Don't add them together, multiply them together. All right, let's go on to example 4 now. So your school is 4 miles east and 1 mile south of your apartment. Okay, a recycling center where your class is going on a field trip is 2 miles east and 3 miles north of your apartment. Estimate the distance between the recycling center and your school. Well, let's pretend that my apartment is here at 0, 0, right? Makes sense. If this was a map, can't we all agree that this would be north? This would be south. This would be east. And this would be west. So if my school is 4 miles east, that would be here. And 1 mile south of your apartment, that's where school would be. Okay. The recycling center is 2 miles east, so that would be here, and 3 miles north. So right here, let's give that an R for recycling center. Estimate the distance between the recycling center and your school. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to do the distance formula because that's a slanted line, okay? If it's a line that's going straight up and down or straight side to side, we could use that absolute value way that we did back in the other lesson. But because this is a slanted line, you can do the distance formula. Or worst case scenario, you can always do the distance formula because that will always work, okay? So I wanna find RS. So I'm gonna do a big square root, okay? If you need to, maybe I'm gonna write down over here, R is at 2, 3, and S is at 4, -1. Okay, so let's do, we'll call this x1, y1, x2, y2. So I'm gonna do 4 minus 2 squared plus -1, because I started with 4, I have to start with -1, minus 3 squared. I'm still all underneath that square root, so I make it a little bit longer. All right, 4 minus 2 is 2 squared plus -1 minus 3, okay? I already owe somebody $1 and I borrow 3 more. Well, now I'm -$4, right? So -4 stays in parentheses, remember, squared. Okay, 2 times 2 is 4. -4 times -4 gives me a positive number, and that positive number is 16. 16 plus 4 is 20. Okay, now either way, now regardless if you're in geometry or geometry concepts here, if I'm talking about a real life scenario like what we're talking about right now, if you told me that the distance between the school and the recycling center was square root 20 miles away, would that make any sense at all? No. If we went ahead and we were in geometry and we broke this down into the simplest radical form, which would be 2√5, I believe, just off the top of my head. If I said 2√5 miles, that doesn't make any sense either, okay? So in this case, okay, I do actually want you to take the square root of 20 and figure out what that answer is, okay? So I would take the square root of 20, hit enter, and it is 4.47. So that is approximately 4.5 miles. That's the answer that I want to see, okay? In that case, that is fine for you to actually write down the decimal, okay? So you just got to be careful of what the scenario is, okay? If it's a regular problem, I don't really care about that. Like this, I don't care in the end what that exact number is, okay? In this case, I do, because that wouldn't make sense. All right, that's all I got for you.